The river reeks of death, its foul stench permeating the air. The end is near. For a decade, I've been on the run, hiding under countless rocks and in the murky gutters where remnants of civilization have rotted away. No town, no village, no city has offered me shelter. No friends, no home to seek refuge in. I am beyond reach, a decayed testament to the fact that the pursuit of knowledge can curse those who dare to pursue it. 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye, and the dust refuses to leave my shoes, just as the memories of what I uncovered refuse to fade. This recording is my final testament, and this desolate spot by the Nile will be my last resting place. Thank God for that, for I can no longer bear this broken vessel of a body. To those of you who hear my tale, let it serve as a warning. Abandon any desire to uncover the relics of the past, for they are cursed by forces far beyond what the modern mind can grasp. I must babble, for the sun is setting, and soon, my pursuer will be upon me. My name is Dr. Edwin Mercer, and if you're hearing this, heed my words. Let my story be a warning to the curious. When this all began, I was filled with ambition. As an archaeologist, I dreamed of making a discovery so monumental that it would lead to fame, perhaps even a place in history books. I longed for a name that would be remembered, even if only for a paragraph or a single line. I wanted to uncover a piece of humanity's past that could rewrite our story as a civilization. By the time I was 32, I believed I had found exactly that. The public doesn't realize that many archaeological breakthroughs are made long after their initial discovery. There are countless digs, ruins uncovered, bones unearthed. Too many, in fact. More often than not, these relics are stored away in crates and boxes in the depths of museums and academic institutions, waiting for future generations to understand them. Sometimes, this takes years, and in my case, the dusty crate that held the promise of fame and fortune had been left untouched for over a century. I had traveled from New York to Glasgow, Scotland, to study the South Uist mummies. While there, a colleague, Dr. Lila Henshaw, graciously allowed me access to the museum's archives, where crates and documents from 2 centuries of excavations were stored, waiting to be rediscovered. It was purely by accident that I found the tablet. I had been searching for an old text on burial practices to assist my study when I came across a peculiar entry in the museum's archive book. It read, 1883, Pre-dynastic stone tablet. Origin unknown. How could I resist such a mystery? Indeed, I could spare a few hours to investigate such a curious item. As I navigated the maze of crates and boxes, the possibilities raced through my mind. Origin unknown. How could its origin be uncertain? Indeed, an expert could quickly pinpoint its history through the language, hieroglyphs, or the material it was made from. After a long search, I finally found it. The crate bore several old, weathered stamps from places like Al-Fayoum, Cairo, Boston, Vienna, London, and Glasgow. It had clearly made the rounds, passed from one expert to the next, each scratching their heads in confusion. The crate was sealed tight, and as I prepared to open it with a crowbar, I felt it. An eerie sensation that would grow to be a constant companion. It was like someone walking over my grave. A sense of dread and coldness crept up my spine, and my face drained of color. It wasn't unusual to feel uneasy in such a quiet, isolated basement, but something about this moment was different, like the earth was closing in on me, the taste of sand in my mouth. The feeling passed quickly, but my excitement for the discovery soon drowned out my discomfort. With the crowbar, I pried open the crate, and there it was, wrapped in cloth, the stone tablet, grim and somber. Its appearance immediately struck me. I had seen other Egyptian tablets, but this one was different. Older, its edges cracked and crumbled like ash. It was no wonder the archaeologists of 1883 had struggled to read it. The surface had been defaced and vandalized. It was clear that someone had tried to hide its message. When I consulted with the museum's archivists, they could only tell me that a letter from Dr. Jonathan Fitzpatrick, the last known scholar to handle the tablet, was all that remained of his work. Dr. Fitzpatrick had been a well-respected academic, but the details surrounding his discovery were vague. It seemed he had found the tablet somewhere in the Sahara Desert, but soon after, he fell gravely ill. His final letter was a fevered, incoherent rambling, repeating the phrase, "a thing of ash," multiple times. That phrase sent a shudder down my spine. It was clear that Dr. Fitzpatrick had succumbed to a terrible sickness shortly after his discovery. His demise likely the result of his illness. With some persuasion, I was able to acquire the tablet for further study. To most, the inscription was nothing more than a forgotten relic. But to me, it was a mystery, an obsession. What was the message? Why had it been erased, and who had gone to such lengths to remove it? From that moment, my life became consumed by the tablet. I couldn't stop thinking about it. By day, I studied it, and by night, I dreamed of the Sahara Desert and the secrets buried beneath its sands. Then I had an idea. I knew that recent scanning techniques had been used to decipher old, seemingly unreadable texts and images. Perhaps these same methods could be applied to the tablet. After months of work and considerable expense, I was able to extract new data from the stone. I'll spare you the details of the methods I used or the specifics of what I uncovered. I cannot risk anyone else attempting the same and falling into the same trap I did. What I can tell you is this. The inscription revealed the existence of a tomb predating the tremendous Egyptian dynasties. I was elated. I had uncovered what might be the oldest known examples of Egyptian writing. More than that, the images depicted an event. A group of people visiting the tomb, their arms raised in praise of the sun. Yet one detail in the carving disturbed me. A withered, deformed figure standing among the celebrants, now lifeless. It seemed to be a metaphor for a plague, one that had decimated the people enough to warrant recording it on a tablet. My discovery was my obsession, and though it was far from a public revelation, I couldn't shake the weight of it. I hadn't yet shared the find with the academic world. I feared that someone with more influence would claim the tomb's treasure before I could keep myself silent. So, I returned the tablet to the museum and kept the recorded images for myself, telling those there, even my closest friend, that I had found nothing of interest. Ego was indeed my first sin, but it would not be my last. Soon enough, I was headed for Egypt, the place where the tomb awaited, the source of all that has since befallen me. Finding it, though, was far more challenging than I had anticipated. After 9 months of failed digs, failed surveys, and endless disappointments, I eventually found it. It lay at the foot of a mountainside, shrouded in its shadow. For this, I had hired 4 Egyptian archaeology students eager for recognition, believing that such a discovery would make them household names. They agreed to keep the expedition a secret, especially since we had no official permission to dig there. But I did not doubt that the uncovering of a historic find would outweigh any punishment. My name would be immortalized in the history books, and that was all that mattered. At first, we found an unusual relic, not a forgotten piece of ancient pottery or stone, but a 19th century digging tool. Shovels, trowels, and even old bags and provisions were unearthed as we continued our work. It seemed as though someone had intentionally filled the area with objects from both recent and ancient pasts. Among them, we found an old, empty crate marked with the date 1883. Dr. Fitzsimmons, the very man who had discovered the tablet, had likely seen the tomb before me. But if that were the case, why had he left behind his equipment? Worse still, why had he buried it all? What was hidden beneath the desert surface that had made him so fearful? Despite these unsettling thoughts, we pressed on. Over the next 3 days, as the winds of the desert howled through our camp, the tension among the team grew palpable. I barely slept, and the students began to argue amongst themselves. One student, Harking, claimed to have seen an intruder in his tent one night, a figure that vanished as he awoke. His growing paranoia only added to the unease. By the 4th day, as we dug deeper, we spoke less, communicating only with the uneasy silence that pervaded our camp. Then, on the 4th day, Harking yelled in excitement. We had found it, the entrance to the tomb. The stone had been sealed long ago, and as the sunlight began to fade, I hurriedly packed my bag with a voice recorder, a flashlight, and a camera. I gave orders for the rest of the team to remain outside with radio contact, though I allowed Harking to accompany me inside. It was only fitting. After all, he had been the first to recognize what we had uncovered. As we entered, the tomb was not as I had expected. The walls were in disrepair, and sand had filled much of the passage. Still, we pushed forward. The corridor led us to a small room, and there, amid the decaying stone and rubble, stood a statue unlike anything I had ever seen. The air seemed to thicken as I approached it. It stood at least 5,000 years old and was made from onyx, its surface jagged and blackened. It was human-shaped but twisted, one arm longer than the other, the legs crooked, and the body misshapen. The most unsettling thing, though, was its face, or rather, the lack of one. It had no eyes, mouth, or nose. Yet, as I stood before it, I could feel its gaze on me, even though there were no eyes. I reached out to touch it, my excitement overwhelming me, when it struck me. Something was wrong. I had not heard Harking's reaction to the statue. Turning around, I found myself facing only emptiness. A deep, chilling silence took hold of me. Then, a scream split the air. It was Harking stumbling backward in horror. He ran out of the room, his feet barely touching the ground. I followed, thinking he was frightened by the statue, but soon I realized the truth. We were not alone in the tomb. Behind me, I heard something move, shifting sands, grains sliding as if the room itself was alive. Spinning around, I caught a glimpse of something, almost human, yet not. It resembled the statue, twisted and malformed, with limbs that should not have been. It stood in the corner, staring at me with eyes that weren't there. Fear gripped me entirely. I no longer cared about the risks, the possibility of a cave-in, or the tomb collapsing in on us. I needed to escape. I turned and ran, not caring whether I tripped or fell. My heart pounded as I scrambled through the corridor, desperate to reach the surface. As I neared the entrance, I heard the sound of the creature behind me, a voice, an utterance in a language I could not comprehend, yet it sounded familiar, ancient, and then, unmistakable, a laugh. By the time I reached the outside, Harking was in a state of complete delirium, his mind shattered. The rest of the team had gathered around him, trying to console him, but they, too, were on edge, trembling with fear. I tried to speak, but before I could, one of the archaeologists looked up, his face frozen in terror. He screamed, and chaos erupted. The group scrambled to escape, frantic and panicked. I ran after them, trying to understand what had happened, but they refused to listen. Harking, in particular, cowered in his tent, pleading with me for mercy. I tried to calm him, but when he heard my voice, he only screamed louder, his cries of terror so profound that I was forced to retreat in shock, stumbling away from the madness that had overtaken us. A searing pain suddenly etched across my face as one. Then 2 of my colleagues began to attack me, kicking at my face and hands as I lay helpless on the ground, each blow showering me with desert grit. Blood poured from my nose and mouth, and it was then that I realized they were going to kill me. The realization sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through me, and despite their continued assault, I managed to crawl to my knees, then my feet, before fleeing into the night, bloodied, confused, and terrified. The desert did not welcome me. My body, frozen inside, felt no comfort from the unrelenting heat, though the sun finally rose above the dunes, baking the land below. Inside, I felt only cold, an icy grip that seeped into my bones, making each step heavier. Without water, without supplies, I staggered aimlessly through the vast, unforgiving Sahara. The thirst, the maddening thirst, gripped me, my mouth as dry as the parched earth beneath my feet. It was torture, unyielding, and I knew that it would eventually kill me. The searing pain of sunstroke would follow soon after. But somehow, luck, or perhaps fate, appeared to smile on me. As I descended a steep sand dune, a long crack in the desert floor appeared before me, a ravine. Below, I spotted a small, clear pool of water, an oasis in the harsh desert. Weak and desperate, I knew I had no choice but to try and reach it. With each trembling movement, I carefully descended, clutching the jagged stone walls. But in my weakened state, a shard of rock broke away beneath my hands. I fell and all went black. I have no memory of how long I was unconscious, but when I came to, the sun had sunk low and night was falling. The thirst had not abated. In fact, it had worsened. The pool of water, my hope for survival, was still in sight, but as I crawled toward it, I watched in horror as the clear liquid began to transform. It darkened, turning into a thick, foul sludge, its oily surface rippling with an unnatural darkness. My last shred of hope died then. With no strength left to resist, I collapsed, exhausted, beside the poisoned water, awaiting my inevitable end. Yet death did not come. Hours bled into days as I lay in the pit, the thirst gnawing at me, driving me mad. My body ached with the emptiness. My throat burned from dehydration, and I could feel the last remnants of life slipping away. It was only on the third night that I heard it, a presence, someone nearby. Looking up through the crevice, I saw a figure silhouetted against the moonlit sky. My heart beat faster, but I gathered all my remaining strength and called out for help. Desperation mixed with relief filled me as I hoped for rescue. But the figure did not respond. It simply stared down at me, its gaze cold and unreadable, before it began to climb down towards me. I should have remained silent. I should have let it pass by, but it was too late. The creature moved with a disturbing, jerky grace, its body contorting unnaturally as it descended. Its arms were mismatched, one longer than the other, and its movements were warped, almost human but not quite. As it reached the bottom of the ravine, it dropped to all fours and crawled towards me with an unsettling speed, its shoulder blades shifting beneath its skin like something foreign. My heart pounded in my chest, and a scream tore from my throat. Not for help, but for the terror that had consumed me. There was no salvation. I had awakened something ancient, something malevolent, and now it was here to claim me. The coldness inside me intensified. It was not merely physical. It was a chilling presence that gripped my very soul. I could feel the thing's hand as it reached for me, its fingers like dust, touching my chest. Ice coursed through my veins, and the pain was unbearable. My vision blurred, and my breath stilled. In a final act of desperation, I rolled to the side and fell into the toxic pool beneath me. The viscous sludge pulled me down, swallowing me whole. I fought against it, thrashing and kicking, but the weight of the liquid dragged me deeper, smothering my every effort. I could not breathe. I could not see. My lungs burned as I held my breath, but the thick, acrid substance entered me anyway, suffocating me. Pain filled every fiber of my being. I had given up and welcomed death, but it did not come. Instead, I remained, trapped, drowning in a nightmare that refused to end. I had no idea how long I fought to stay afloat, but eventually, my numb hands found the edge of the pool. With what little strength I had left, I climbed, dragging myself inch by inch, gasping for air as I emerged from the pool. The black liquid stayed in my lungs, choking me as I coughed and retched. Finally, I expelled the foul sludge, but I was still alive. I was alone. The creature was gone. The desert stretched out before me, the sun's rays cutting through the slit above. My body ached, but I had one singular thought: to find water, to quench this relentless thirst. I needed to survive. I needed to escape, if only to try and make sense of the madness that had overtaken us all. It was clear to me now we had been cursed. I had uncovered something I should not have, and now it was hunting us. Though it took a monumental effort, nearly costing me my life on several occasions, I eventually climbed the rock face, retracing the creature's twisted path in reverse. Exhausted and trembling, I finally found freedom. The sun beat down on me relentlessly, but the icy chill in my bones refused to abate. At first, I wondered if I was suffering from some disease or poison, perhaps a deadly affliction released from the tomb, one that caused severe hallucinations and madness. For weeks, I wandered through the desert, searching in vain for any sign of civilization. My only hope was to find water, any source that could quench my tormenting thirst, and perhaps some fire to melt the coldness gnawing at my very core. Twice, I came across small pools of liquid, but each time, they turned into the same blackened, foul sludge, undrinkable and rotting. And still, no matter how dehydrated, I did not die. Though my body screamed in agony, the desert refused to claim me, keeping me tethered to a world I no longer understood. Then there were the nights. While others might rest, sheltered from the elements, I knew the nightfall was the harbinger of something far worse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt the presence of the creature, the thing from the tomb, closing in on me. Relentless, it would follow me, climbing the dunes no matter where I went. It would appear with the dark, its form twisted and malformed, not quite human but not quite anything else. Its charcoal gray body, powdered and crumbling, sought only one thing: me. Why? I didn't know, but the certainty of its malevolent intent was apparent. It was as if I had become its prey, trapped in a game that stretched beyond the bounds of time. And so each night I ran. I fled from the inescapable horror that pursued me, always just out of reach but never gone. When I could no longer continue, I collapsed and rested during the day, hoping the creature would not find me. But it always did. One night, as a sandstorm whipped through the desert, I moved quickly through the blinding grains, doing my best to evade the thing from the tomb. For the first time in weeks, I saw the glimmer of civilization on the horizon. A small Egyptian town. The sight of it was a beacon of hope, and my heart surged. Perhaps, at last, I would find salvation. But when I entered the town, seeking help, I was met with only fear and violence. The first person I encountered, a young man, screamed upon seeing me, a primal mixture of fear and rage. Within moments, a mob formed, and I found myself fleeing for my life once again. They pelted me with stones, beat me with sticks, and chased me through the streets, their hatred unmistakable. Why? What had I done to deserve this? But their madness mirrored the violence of my team. It was as if I were a threat to them, an enemy, something they couldn't understand. I barely escaped the town, weaving through narrow alleys and gaps between buildings until the sandstorm obscured my pursuers. I collapsed, exhausted and heartbroken. The wind howled, and as I looked out over the dark desert, I saw it, my ashen pursuer, moving through the storm towards me. Each night it followed. No matter how far I ran, no matter how I tried to hide, it would appear. With its twisted movements and its shifting, misshapen body, it was unstoppable. I knew then that there would be no haven, no place to hide from this horror. No town would take me, and no hope remained but to face the source of my torment. I had to return to the tomb. For years, I wandered the Sahara, driven by one goal: to find the tomb and uncover the truth. But with no compass or map, I was lost. And yet, one day on the horizon, I saw it, the mountain range. Without hesitation, I made my way toward it. Eventually, I stumbled across our old camp, the place where it all began, where it all fell apart. It was abandoned, forgotten. One of the tents still stood, though the desert had long since swallowed the others. The camp, once a symbol of promise, now lay in ruins. I wondered if anyone had ever looked for me, if anyone had cared. Dr. Samuel Russell. Had I really disappeared so completely that no one had thought to search for me? The thought filled me with anger and frustration. How could they forget me so quickly? In a fit of rage, I tore at the tent canvas, exposing my belongings beneath, now buried in the sand. Forgotten like Dr. Fitzsimmons, forgotten like me, I made my way to the tomb's entrance, determined to find the answers that had eluded me for so long. I dug through the sand, the remnants of my previous excavation, until I could slip inside. I pulled the old dynamo flashlight from my weathered haversack, and miraculously, it still worked. I moved cautiously through the tomb's familiar passageways, the rubble of our earlier work scattered around me. When I entered the central chamber, the eerie stillness that greeted me was unsettling. The statue at the room's center still loomed, just as it had when I first laid eyes on it. Its terrifying form, twisted and hunched, sent a chill through me. It looked every bit as monstrous as the creature that had haunted me for years. Yet I had to press on. I had to understand what had happened to me. I had to know why I was cursed. That's when I noticed something at the statue's feet. A block of granite partially buried in the sand. The thing upon which the creature stood. And as I approached, I realized with growing horror that it was not just any block of stone. It was far more than I had ever imagined. I began digging frantically, my hands scraping through the sand in desperation, and then I saw it, the inscription. It was identical to the one on the tablet that had drawn me here, but this time the scene was complete. Unlike the damaged version I had studied in the museum basement, this one told the whole story. How I regretted disturbing it. How I wished I had left it buried in the museum's archives. I wished I could turn back to forget all of this, to go home. The stone carvings depicted people worshipping the sun outside the tomb, and in the final panel, the thing of ash reveled in their deaths. But this tablet was different. It had not been eroded by the sands of time or marred by the archaeologist's chisel. No, this tablet revealed the entire tale. The statue, it seemed, had been unearthed from a cave in the mountains nearby. This suggested that it was far older than even Egyptian civilization itself. Its origins were unknown, its purpose unfathomable. The statue had been taken to a city, where strange, horrific creatures began to emerge from it during the night. After much bloodshed, the statue was returned to the tomb at the foot of the mountains, where it had first been found. The people who praised the sun were brought there as sacrifices, perhaps offerings meant to appease the relic. The tomb wasn't really a tomb at all. It was a shrine, a home, a prison for something wretched and evil. And the ancient Egyptians, in their fear, hoped to keep it bound by offering themselves in its place. And I cursed to escape its clutches, was condemned to walk the earth forever. No water to sustain me, only the chill of death, the coldness of the tomb, gnawing at my bones. I had become nothing more than a vessel for suffering, cursed to wander until the thing found me again to end it all. Then I heard it, the shuffling, the scraping of claws against stone, the low, guttural crawling. The creature had returned home, and I was inside its lair. As its twisted body slithered into the room, I saw its blank stare. No eyes, no mouth, just a lifeless human-shaped form. It was ancient beyond reckoning, far older than any myth, some ancient terror of the earth. It moved toward me, kicking through the sand, dislodging something buried beneath. At that moment I realized the truth. I was not cold because of the desert's icy nights. I was freezing because I was standing in that crowded place. The sands, the chill, the dryness in my mouth. My body had never left the tomb. I could feel it now. The sensation of sand filling my mouth, the taste of death. I turned, horrified, and saw the rotting corpse of Dr. Samuel Russell lying in the tomb before me. My body, long dead, decayed beyond recognition. My heart screamed, but I could not escape. I bolted past the statue, rushing through the passageway, but I was already too far gone. I was already a part of the tomb. I had died there. A decade had passed, yet my body had never left the tomb. The creature, that ashen thing, was not just hunting me. It was part of me now. I had become a part of the curse. How many towns had I entered since then? How many people had I terrified? The abomination that I had become, my crumbling, ashen form, had become the very thing I had once feared. And no one could understand. I could no longer drink. I could no longer find life in water. Wherever I went, everything turned to black sludge, undrinkable, dead. The coldness that gripped me was not the cold of night or the desert. It was the cold of the tomb, of death itself, which followed me wherever I went. And at night, that creature, the thing from the tomb, came for me relentlessly, unceasingly. I had walked the earth for 10 years, but I was not alive. How could I be? My body had been left behind in that tomb, the place where it all began. I had become a monster, just as I feared. But what was its purpose? Why had I been chosen for this fate? Had I been meant to become a terror, a haunting presence for those who dared to enter the tomb? Or was I just an unfortunate soul who had crossed the wrong path? I have no answers, only questions. And yet, I refuse to become like the thing I chase in the desert. I refuse to be a slave to this ancient evil, no matter what horrors it holds for me. I have come to the Nile. The waters should bring life, but as I sit by its banks, I see the corruption. The water has turned black, thick with decay. The creature is near. I feel it creeping through the darkness, coming for me once more. I will wait by the river. I will sit here and wait for the moment to come, for I know that there is a way to end this. When I fell into the pool of sludge, the creature stopped chasing me. Perhaps that's the key. Maybe if I can kill it, I can be free from this torment. A decade of thirst, of suffering, has worn me down. I have seen the depths of what lies beneath the sands, the evil that has festered there for millennia. And now, I sit here, awaiting whatever end is coming for me. If you are listening to this, heed my warning. Leave the tombs of the past alone. Let them remain buried beneath the desert sands. They are not meant to be disturbed. This is the final testament of Dr. Samuel Russell. And now I see it, the thing of ash crawling toward me. But I am not afraid. My suffering has long extinguished my fear. If I am never heard from again, know this, I did something worth remembering. I fought the creature, and I pulled it into the river. Now we both sleep in its depths. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more stories in the coming weeks. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Take care and have a good night.